sponsorship by Moshe and Dvorah Werdersheim in gratitude for Hashem's kindness. And also, also sponsored this morning by Bruce Luchansky, that are learning this morning should be a zchus for Shleima for Bava Basra. Okay, today's daf is daf Kuf Kuf Zayin. We're going to pick up actually the first word of the daf at the top of Kuf Kuf Zayin. So we've been dealing a little bit with the halachas of a tumtum. A tumtum is a person that's born with some skin or membrane that covers the genital area, and they're unable to determine at the time of birth whether this child is a male or a female. So Ameimar says, and this is really going on. We learned before that a tumtum does not get pishnayim, that the portion of the Torah that talks about the Bechor getting a double portion does not apply to a tumtum. And so Ameimar is kind of adding on to that, says Ameimar Amar af eino memayit chelek bechora, doesn't reduce the chelek, the portion of the Bechor, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. Shenemar, because the pasuk says the yoldu lo vanim, the pasuk that's written by the case of where the question of pishnayim, it talks about that there's a ahuva and a snua, there's a beloved wife and a disliked wife, and it says v'yoldu lo banim, they have sons. So it tells you ben b'shas leida, that this parsha that talks about a bechor, the oldest son taking a double portion, relates specifically when you're dealing with a son, not when you're dealing with someone who at the time of birth is not known whether they're a son or not. So now what does it mean that the tumtum is not memayit from the chelik of the bechor? So the simplest way to explain it would be the way the Rashbam explains. He gives an example. He says, let's say you have someone who dies, and you have as follows. You have 9 manos. You have, or let's just say $900 in the estate, and there are 3 children. There's the Bechor, the oldest born son. There's another regular son, and then there's this tumtum. So what we're saying is as follows, that as it relates to figuring out the special portion that goes to the Bechor, we ignore the presence of the tumtum. So therefore, in this case, let's assume you had $900 in the estate, and you had 3 children, but we're going to ignore the tumtum. So if we were going to ignore the tumtum, what would be the distribution? That you would divide it into 3. So $900, you divide it into 300 each. The Bechor would take 2 and get 600, and the other son would take the remaining 300. That's how you would divide. And so what the Gemara is saying, Ameimar says, is for purposes of calculating the extra portion of the Bechor, that's how you would count it. You ignore the tumtum as if he's not there, and therefore the Bechor will get his regular $300 portion plus the double portion of 300, and the other son will get 300. So that's just for purposes of figuring out the special portion that goes to the Bechor. So we figured out that the Bechor gets 300 for the special portion. So now what we do is we take that 300 off the top, because the tumtum does not count for that purpose, and now we're left with $600. At this point, the tumtum can come back into the calculation. And so therefore we look at there being 3 children, the Bechor, the other son, and the tumtum. And at that point we divide the remaining estate equally, and they each get 200. So what's going to happen at the end of the day? How would this estate get divided? The Bechor will get 500 because he has the 300 plus a third of the remaining estate, and each of the 2 remaining children, and again, obviously with the tumtum, that this assumes that we subsequently determine that he's a male. If he'd be a female and be a daughter, he wouldn't get it all. So once they determine he's a male, so he shares in the general distribution, but does not share or is not factored into that initial calculus. And what would be, and let's say we were counting him from the beginning. So then what would happen is you would divide it really into 4, and the son who was the Bechor would get 450, and each of the others would get 225. But because we don't count the tumtum in the initial calculation, instead you get 500, 200, and 200. So that's Ameimar's halacha. Rav Shizbi says, Af eina nimo lishmono. Not only that tumtum has an additional halacha that he does not get his bris on the 8th day, the way the Rashbam understands is that you are not dochas Shabbos for purposes of a tumtum, because we know the halacha is that if a son is born, as long as the bris is be'ita, as long as it's on time, that it would be dochas Shabbos. You would do the bris on Shabbos, even though you have things that would otherwise be a malacha, but you do it anyway. You do it anyway on the 8th day, as long as it's on the actual 8th day, you do it even on Shabbos. And so that is what Rav Shizbi says, is that when you have a tumtum who's born, does not get the bris on the 8th day on Shabbos, even though it's the 8th day. The Amar Kra, how does he know? Because the pasuk says, Isha ki tazriya v'yolda zachar, that it says that if a woman gives birth and has a zachar, and then shortly after that, in the next pasuk, it says, Uvayom hashmini yimo, that on the 8th day, he has a bris. Now, where do we know this idea that a bris is dochas Shabbos? It's from the pasuk Uvayom hashmini yimo, on the 8th day, even if it's Shabbos, right? So therefore, but in this case, because you see that the pasuk that says you do it even on Shabbos, Uvayom hashmini yimo, is right next to the pasuk that says Isha ki sazriya v'yolda zachar, that if a woman has a zachar, so you see achi he zachar mishas leida, that in order for the milah to be docha Shabbos, to happen even on Shabbos, it has to be a child that's born knowing that he is a zachar. So that is the view of the Rashbam. I'm going to take a minute here and just tell you something interesting, although it's not me, but okay. So the Ramban brings in the name of the Rif that the way he learns the way he learns this limud is that the entire category of giving a bris on the 8th day does not apply to a tumtum, and therefore even a tumtum when you figure out is really a male, and so therefore what would you do according if you could do the milah on the 1st day? That's how they understand that there's no concept of waiting for the 8th day. And the question that the Achronim ask in particular, so I saw a beautiful thing from the Shiri of David Bavarsky, who says as follows. So the question they all ask is, it seems that the limud is more like the Ramban and the Rif. It says the pasuk that the idea that you give a bris milah on the 8th day is tied to it being a zachar. So why is it not like that? And they're trying to understand why the Rashbam sees it as only talking about whether you do it on Shabbos, not talking about whether the entire concept applies. And so he ties it to Gemara. The Gemara in Shabbos in Daf Kuf Lamed Hey Amud Beis talks about, it has a discussion between Reb Asi and Abaya. And so Reb Asi says is that when does the halacha of the 8th day apply is only when a woman becomes tamei leida. We're going to deal with this in a minute, but in other words, a woman, when she has a child, either a male or a female, she becomes tamei. And the idea is, so and then that pasuk that writes that she becomes tamei is right next to the pasuk of the 8th day, and so therefore Rav Asi says the 8th day does not apply to a woman who does not become tamei leida. Abaya says, an interesting language, he says, Dairos harishonim yachichu. The earlier generations proved the point. And so the question is, what's he talking about? Dairos harishonim yachichu. So the way they understand it is that they say by Avram Avinu, you see that they did the bris milah on the 8th day, and that's even though they had no Tumah Leida, because there was nothing in the Torah wasn't giving yet. They didn't have Tumas Leida, and yet you see bris milahs on the 8th day. To which Rav Asi responds and says, no, once they had Matan Torah, they made a halacha that the 8th day only applies when there's Tumas Leida. That's the Gemara over there. And the Rambam, though, paskins something interesting. La halacha. The halacha is that if you have a woman gets a C-section, a Yotzei Dofen, so it's not a regular birth. If not a regular birth, there's no Tumas Leida. So therefore, the Rambam says that there's no Tumas Leida by Yotzei Dofen, but you should still do the bris on the 8th day, but not on Shabbos. So that's kind of similar to our Rashbam, and that's what we're going to get back to. But the question everyone asks is, where does the Rambam get this from? And either the halacha should be like Abaya, and you learn from Avram Avinu that bris is on the 8th day. You learn that bris is on the 8th day, and from Avram Avinu that this hekesh is wrong, and therefore you should do the bris on the 8th day, even if it's Shabbos. in which case the whole halacha doesn't apply. And then therefore you would do the bris on the first day. So where does the Rambam get it from? So some, like the Ran, say that there is a suffix, that the Rambam was mesupik, whether it was the halacha like Rav Asi or like a bias, so therefore he says do it on the 8th day, but not if it's Shabbos, because you don't want to be over on Shabbos. There's a famous Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim says as follows. He says something very interesting. The way most people understand the bias halacha is, a bias says you see from this the fact that Avraham Avinu had it on the 8th day, that the hekesh is not a good hekesh, and that's what they're saying. The Rambam says, Reb Chaim says that really it could be saying something else. Avraham Avinu, that there's a concept of giving a bris on the 8th day, and it's not saying that the hekesh is wrong. It's saying you have two sources for bris milah being on the 8th day. One is the place in Parshas Tazria where it says, okay, and one is you see from Avraham Avinu. It also says that you should give every son a bris on the 8th day. So therefore, Reb Chaim says that the way the Rambam understands is as follows: that the halacha of Yotzei Dofen, which says you only have an inyan to give a bris milah on the 8th day, does not apply if a woman. It only applies if a woman is Tamei Leda. Where does he get that from? From Tazria. In a case of a Yotzei Dofen, a C-section, she's not Tamei Leda, so therefore the halacha of a bris doesn't apply from Parshas Tazria. But it does apply, according to the Rambam. There's still a concept from Avraham Avinu. You see that you should give a bris on the 8th day. So Parshas Tazria doesn't apply, but the bris of Avraham Avinu does apply. And therefore, where do we know that bris is Docha Shabbos? Only from Parshas Tazria. So he says, if Parshas Tazria is knocked out as the source, you can no longer do it on Shabbos, but you still have to do it on the 8th day, Avinu. And therefore, you could say the same thing really by Tumtum also to explain the Rashbam. You could say that according to the Rashbam, he's saying you still have to do Milah on the 8th day, because even though Parshas Tazria doesn't apply because by Tumtum it says Zachar, but the bris of Avraham Avinu still applies. But that bris doesn't apply on Shabbos. So that's how the Rashbam gets this idea that you would do it on Shabbos, that you would not do it on Shabbos, but otherwise you should be makbid on the 8th day. For other reasons, I think the Rambam himself might not hold like that, but anyway, it's an interesting sugya. Okay, so continuing for the moment, so we're Rav Sharvia Amar, so we're 5 lines down the last word. Rav Sharvia Amar, Af ein imoy tmea leda. So he says in a case of a tumtum, and this is really the halacha we just learned, that in a case of a tumtum, the woman, the mother, does not become tameh from giving birth. The Amar Kra, because the Pasuk says, Isha kisazriya v'yalda zachar. It says if a woman has a zachar, a male, yamim, and she becomes tameh for 7 days. So what do you see from this? Ad sheyehei zachar mishas leida. That when does she become tameh for 7 days? When she has a zachar at the time, it's a male at the time that she gives birth. But if at the time she gives birth it's a tumtum, then it doesn't apply, and tumah would not apply. Now, what is this tumah we're talking about? It's important because it'll be relevant to what we're about to learn. You remember that when a woman has a male son, that she becomes tameh for 7 days, and thereafter for 33 days, and she's tameh those 7 days, for the next 33 days, even if she sees blood, she doesn't become tameh. The halacha by a daughter, if a woman has a daughter, is different. If she becomes tameh for 14 days, and then for 66 days, she's tahar. Even if she sees blood, she doesn't become tameh. So what we're learning from here, according to Rav Sharvia, is that whole halacha of tumas leda does not apply to a tumtum, because it only applies when she has a male that you know is a male at the time of birth. Meisvei, the Gemara says, I'll ask you a kasha on Rav Sharvia. Hamapelas tumtum vandrogenes. If someone has a miscarriage, if they have the baby, who's a tumtum, which we've been talking about, which is something that we can't tell whether it's male or female. Vandrogenes, and androgynous is a hermaphrodite, which is a person that demonstrates both characteristics of men, of a man and a woman. So it's indeterminate as to what the gender is. So in those cases, teshev lezachar u'lenekeva, sits in tumah for zachar and nekeva. Now, what does that mean? What is the halacha? So basically, what we're dealing with is These are cases where it's a suffix. It's a tumtum. You don't know if it's a male or female. It's an androgynous. You don't know if it's male or female. So what do? How do you deal with tumah? So if it would be a male, you would have 7 days of tumah. But if it's a female, you would have 14 days of tumah. So obviously, you have to take the more stringent view, and you assume 14 days of tumah. What do you do about the Yemei Tohar, the days that she doesn't become Tohar, that even if she sees blood, she doesn't become Tameh? We have to be concerned that maybe it's a male. And so therefore, a male, the Tahar period only extends to the 40th day. So therefore, what would you do in this case? The first 14 days would be Tameh in case it's a male, and in case it's a female. And then the next 26 days would be Yemei Tohar, days that even if she sees blood, she's still Tahar, because maybe it's a male and the Yemei Tohar end at that point, and she can't go to the 80th day. Halacha that they bring. But what do you see from this? In short, you see that when someone has a tumtum, there's a concept of tumas leda. 14 days, 7 days, 66, we're discussing, but obviously the premise is that there is tumas leda in the case of a tumtum. And Rav Sharvia tried to learn from the pasuk that it says that those are linked, and that if it's a tumtum, there's no tumas leda. So that's a problem. So the Gemara says, Tiyufta Rav Sharvia Tiyufta. You're right. It's a Tiyufta. It's a question without an answer on Rav Sharvia, and therefore Rav Sharvia's halacha is wrong. So the Gemara says, Lema to have a Tiyufta Rav Shizbi. Maybe this brisa is a Tiyufta, is a problem for Rav Shizbi also. Rav Shizbi is the one who learned the Yom Hashmini, the idea that someone can get a bris even on Shabbos, according to the Rashbam, does not apply to a tumtum. So now Rav Shizbi was basically learning out the same limud. He was learning out Isha Ki Zazriya V'Yalda Zakar is next to B'Yom Hashmini Yimo. So it seems to be the same kind of limud that Rav Sharvia was learning. And if Rav Sharvia is wrong, maybe Rav Shizbi is wrong also. So the Gemara says, no, you can't bring that proof from the brisa that talks about the tumtum and androgynous, because Tana Sfuki Misafkale Ulachumra. Because maybe the Tana who said that you wait the 14 days and then you have the 26 days of Yemei Tohar out of doubt, he was saying that because he didn't know if this limud applies, right? The limud of Isha Ki Sazriya V'Yalda Zachar next to Bayam Hashmini Yimol, he didn't know if that hekesh applied. So therefore, the Isha Ki Sazriya V'Yalda Zachar next to V'Tama Shivas Yamim, he didn't know if that hekesh applied. So therefore he said, we're going to go l'chumra. So how does the chumra work? So in the case we discussed of a tumtum being born in androgynous, we go l'chumra by giving the maximum tumah of a boy, and the maximum tumah of a girl, and the minimal yemei tohar of a boy. So that's how we go l'chumra. And Reb Shizbi, who said that you don't do the bris on Shabbos, is also going l'chumra. Why? Because he's saying don't do, even though normally you could do a bris on Shabbos, since in this case it's a tumtum and it's not clear that it's a zachar, so don't do it. So Rav Sharvia is going l'chumra, but Rav Shizbi is going l'chumra, but Rav Sharvia, he was going l'kula, because he was saying tumas leida doesn't apply, meaning if a woman gives birth to a tumtum, she's not tameh at all. That's a kula, that's not a chumra. So therefore, the brisa that asked the question, it was not willing to say, like Rav Sharvia, that for sure Tumah doesn't apply. So that was a question on him. But the brisa being besafik and going l'chumra could be consistent with Rav Shizbi, who also goes l'chumra and saying that you don't do the bris on the 8th day. So the Gemara says, okay, so that's possibly a good answer for Rav Shizbi, but I have a problem. Ihachi, if you're right that the Tana was just masupik and he was not paskening that we don't make this limud, the Tana should have said something else. He should have said that there's three things there's three things that you draw when you're in suffix. So we said you give the 14 days of a nekeva to be l'chumra. You only give 26 days of Yemei Tohar like a zachar. But really, if you're right that you could make this limud and that Tana was besafik, he was uncertain as to whether you make this limud. The limud is saying that when you have a tumtum that's born, there's no tumas leda. If there's no Tumas Leda, then there's also no Yemei Tohar. Those are linked concepts, right? So if there's no Yemei Tohar, then the woman is not Tameh. Dam on the 10th day, or let's say the 20th day, you should not say that she's in the Yemei Tohar, because maybe she was never Tameh in the first place, because Tumas Leda doesn't apply. And if she was never Tameh in the first place, then when she sees Dam on the 20th day, that's not Yemei Tohar, that's Dam Nida. And so therefore, if the Tana was truly Mesupik and was not there to say that that's not a good limud, why wouldn't he also put the Chumrah of Nida and say that there are no Yemei Tohar? Kasha, it's a kasha. And fascinatingly, the Rashbam says, Aval Tiyufta Mamish Eino, it's not really a Tiyufta, it's just a kasha, B'shvil Shechaser Min HaBraisa, because you could, and the Masar Shas says it's the Mishnah that Mishnah is missing the Matzi L'Meimar Tani L'Zachar and the Keva of Nida. Maybe you would change the language to say Nida, so therefore it's only kasha and not a Tiyufta, which is, by the way, how we normally learn. We don't have a problem with this because we often say kasha means kasha, but it's not a tiyufta. Some of you might remember almost a couple months ago when a different day I was saying the daf, we discussed this. Rashbam has the interesting view that he says kasha and tiyufta are the same thing. It's a total rejection. He argues with the Rabbeinu Chanano on daf Ayin Beis, and here the Rashbam seems to be saying the traditional method that it's kasha is different than tiyufta, and you see that the Rabbi Akiva Eiger also points this out. If we want to talk about it afterwards, I have some theories, but it's interesting because here the Rashbam assumes the traditional concept of kasha. Okay, Amar Rava, Tanya Kavasi de Reb Ami. We're on the third wide line. Rava says we learned the brisa like Reb Ami. What was Reb Ami? Reb Ami told us on Kuf Chavav on the Beis that he said the halacha that tumtum that you find is a zachar does not take the pishnayim. That's what we learned. Does not get the double portion. So if you have a tumtum that's the firstborn, and then they open up the tumtum and discover that it's a zachar, so even though he's the bechor, he doesn't get the pishnayim of a bechor because he has to be born at that time as a zachar. That was Reb Ami's halacha, and we're going to now bring a brisa that supports him, because the brisa says ben v'loy tumtum. It says that you have a son. And we're not talking about a tumtum. This is the pasuk that says v'haya ben abachar lasniya. So you see, it has to be a son. So it's saying a son and not a tumtum. Stop it, because it says v'haya ben abachar. So why did it need to say bachar? So that's coming to tell you that it applies and not where it's a suffix. So now bishlama ben v'lo tumtum. So it works out well where we say ben v'lo tumtum kid Reb Ami. To tell you that what does it mean ben v'loy tumtum is to say that a tumtum does not get the pishnayim. Now we're going to focus on the second part, which talks about the bechor v'lo suffix, but that's not really the point for purposes of proving Rav Ami's halacha. You just see from the brisa it says ben v'lo tumtum is coming to tell you, like Rav Ami said, that he doesn't take pishnayim. But now we're going to focus on the second part of the brisa. Ela bechor v'lo suffix lafuke mai. So then what is, when it comes to say that it has to be a bachar who's surely a bachar and not a question of suffix, so it can't be coming to exclude a tumtum because we already learned that from Bain. So what is it coming to say when it says bachar below suffix? Lafuke mididarish rava. It's coming to discredit a drasha that Rava darshan. What did Rava darshan? Because we're going to say a story. The Darish Rava was darshaning. He made a cheshbon. The way the Rashbam explains, he made a cheshbon misvara. He said he's figured as follows the halacha. Shtei nashim sheyoldu beis zacharim b'machbei. So what's the case? He had two women who were married to the same man, two wives of a man, and they were in a cave somewhere, and they each had a baby son. And the question was, no one knows which son was born first. Okay, so now you don't know who the bachar is. Okay, the women come out of the cave. They or other wives have other children to this man, 5 children. So the question is, what happens when someone claims the bachar? So what the advice that Rava said they could do is they should write a harsha. Harsha is basically it's either a concept of shlichus, or it's a concept of giving. How we understand Harsha could be different according to the Gemara learns different ways, but the basic concept is they write a document to each other and says, if I'm the one who's entitled to the Bechora, you can collect it from me, right? So what happens now? You have 5 sons. So if either of the 2 first sons would say it's mine, the other sons would say, prove it, right? But now if the 2 conspire together and say, we're each going to give each other the entitlement, and then the other 3 have no claim, because surely amongst the 2 of them, the Bechora resides. And so therefore they're going to get 3 they're going to get 3 halakim. They're going to get their own 3, but out of this, they're going to break it into 6, and they'll each end up with 1.5. So neither of them ends up with 2, because neither can prove that he was the Bechor. Bring these documents to each other and giving each other power of attorney, essentially what they're going to get is they're each going to get 1.5 shares, and they're better off than they would be otherwise. Because otherwise, you would say no one knows who the Bechor is, and you split it 5 ways, and they each get a smaller piece. Okay, so that was Rava figured that halacha should work that way. Couple of Rava, v'hashalach Ravin, but Ravin sent, and the way the Kosushos understands this Gemara, he says, "Davar zeh sha'alti l'chora bosai." I asked all my rabbis, what does it mean when it says "apik v'lo amrli davar," and they didn't tell me anything. I didn't hear anything. Baram, but surely kach amr mishum Rabbi Yanai. But he said, I realized that they said in the name of Rabbi Yanai that when Rabbi Yanai was darshaning, what does it mean b'chor v'lo safik? It means hukru ubasof nisarvu kosvin harsha zelazeh in kosvin harsha zelazeh. So he says as follows. Rabbi Yanai says there's a distinction to be made here, that if at one point the children were born, which was the Bechor, right? But then they got mixed up in the nursery and they didn't know which one was the Bechor. So in that case, they could write a Harsha, they could write this power of attorney to each other. But in a case of real doubt, where no one ever knew who was the Bechor, so in that case you don't. Why? Because the Torah says, Bechor v'lo safek. It's a Bechor, and not if it's a suffix. So therefore, you minimize a suffix. Now, you might tell me, well, the case where you mix them up in the nursery is also a suffix. So we're saying, look, basically the concept is you should be able to write a Harsha. There's a pasuk that says Bechor v'lo suffix. So we're going to apply that miyut of Bechor v'lo suffix, smallest case we can. What's the smallest case we can? Where no one has any idea which baby was the Bechor. But if at one point they had an idea and that just got lost, in that case, we'll let them do the Harsha Zelazeh. So what do you see from this? You see from this, not like Rava, because Rava said where we had a suffix, no one knew which baby was born first in the cave, they could write a Harsha. And here you see that Ravin was bringing from Rabbi Yanai that in a case where it's a true suffix, the pasuk Bechor v'lo suffix tells you don't do it. So Rava heard this from Ravin, and so Hadar Uki Rava Amora Alai. Rava put an Amora back up, and Amora is a sayer. It's similar to the concept we have of a Metorgaman. They used to speak. They would say it to the Metorgaman or the Amora, and that person would announce it. So Rava had already said his halacha that the halacha is when you have a suffix, you could write a Harsha each to each other. Rava put back up an Amora and said, I made a mistake. And he says, and he darshan to the Amora as follows, Dvorim shamarti lachem tois hein biyadi. These things that I said, that if you have a suffix, you can write a Harsha, was a mistake. Baram, surely, Kacham Mishum Rav Yanai, they said in the name of Rav Yanai, Hukru L'Basaf Nisarvu, that if at one point you recognize them and then they got mixed up, Kosvin Harsha Zelazeh. In that case, you do it. Lo Hukru, but if you didn't recognize it, ain't Kosvin Harsha Zelazeh. Then you would not write a Harsha Zelazeh. So Rava is recanting his initial view that if you have an absolute suffix, which baby was born first, that you could write a Harsha. He says you can't write a Harsha because the pasuk learns out Bechor below suffix. It has to be a certain Bechor. It can't be an uncertain Bechor. And if you don't know which one was the Bechor, then you would not be able to do this aspect of Harsha. And there is no, in other words, why can't you do the aspect of Harsha? Because the concept is there is no allocation of Bechora in this case, because since it's fundamentally a suffix, there's no allocation of Bechor. Okay. Next Gemara, it's 2 lines from the bottom. Sholchule b'nei Akra da'agma l'Shmuel. The people from Akra da'agma sent to Shmuel and said, Yilamdenu Rabbeinu, teach us our master. What happens? Hayu muchzakim b'zeh shehu b'char. In someone that was a b'char. So a guy had children, and maybe he always refers to this child as his b'char. Or maybe he has a child who's 18. And he has another child who's 12. So you say it's muhsuk that this is the b'char. The guy is 18, right? So what you have someone who's muhsuk that he's a b'char. V'amar aviv al acher b'charhu. The father comes along and says, no, he's not the b'char. This kid's the b'char, the 12-year-old, or the kid who I didn't call my b'char. What's the halacha? So they ask Shmuel, do we say when it's muhsuk, do we believe the father or not? Now we learned previously that we do believe the father, but that was talking about in a case where the father. But here we have a chazaka that's going against the father, and so the question is, do we believe the father? That's what they asked Shmuel. Shmuel sent back and said, Kosvin harsha zel base that you should write a harsha. That if there's a doubt between these two brothers, the muhsuk, the chazaka said one is the brother, the father says a different one's the brother, so they should write the harsha between each other. Now notice the Shmuel didn't answer the question. They said, is the father believed or not believed? And he's saying we treat it as a case of suffix. So the Gemara asks, manav shach. Regardless, if the halach is like the Rabbanan, and we'll see in a minute what the machlok is the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda is. If he holds like the Rabbanan, lishlach lu Rabbanan, then he should send back that the halacha is like the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan's halacha is that the father is not believed. And if you hold the halacha like Rabbi Yehuda holds the father is believed, ik Rabbi Yehuda svirle, then lishlach lu Rabbi Yehuda. Then you should send back that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. So why did you send back that they should write a harsha to each other, which is the case of suffix, Rabbanan, and we don't believe the father, or the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, we do believe the father. So the Gemara says, a suffix, whether the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda or the halacha is like the Rabbanan. So now the Gemara says, okay, so that answers up why Shmuel sent back harsha. What's this machlokes, Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan that they're referring to? Mahi, what's the machlokes? The sanya, because we learned it in Brisa. Yakir, the pasuk says, that he should recognize the Bechar, who's the son of the hated wife, but is his first Bechar, he should recognize him to give him Pishnaim, to give him double. Now this word Yakir is an unnecessary word. Why didn't it just say it gives him double? Why does it say he recognizes him to give him double? So the word Yakir is an extra word. So the Gemara says, we darshan Yakir, Yakirenu la'acherim. By him for others. Meaning, not only can the father recognize him for purposes of giving him a double portion, he can not just recognize him, but he can identify him for others. And therefore, you see from the pasuk that a father is believed. Even though normally the halacha is that you need to aid him, because there's a drush of Yakir, you would say that the father is believed. Mikan, Rabbi Yehuda says, Neman Adam Leimer Zeh b'ni Bechar. Believe to say, this is my son, the Bechar, even in a case of Chazaka. And now Rabbi Yehuda continues and says something interesting. Ukeshem sheneman Adam Lomar Zeh b'ni Bechar. To say, this is my son, the Bechar, and will believe the father. Kach Neman Adam Loimer Zeh ben Grusha uben Chalutza. So too, he's believed to say that this is the son of a divorced woman or the son of a woman who had chalitza. All right, so let's take a couple steps to understand what's going on here. Okay, a grusha, a kohen is not, Minatorah is not allowed to marry a grusha. So Rashbam says there's one of two cases. Either he divorced his wife and then remarried her and then had a child, so it's his wife who was the grusha, or he just married a woman who was a grusha. So one day, no one knew this. One day he wakes up, he says, this son over here that's been my son, just know that he's the son of a gerusha, or a chalutza is a woman who fell to yibum. The brothers of her husband didn't want to do yibum, so they did chalitza. The halacha midrabanan is that a kohen cannot marry a chalutza, and he says, I married a chalutza, and this child is the product of that union. So the halacha is, if a kohen marries a gerusha or a chalutza and has a child, the child is a chalal. we believe a father to say that this is my Bechor, and we also believe him to say that he's a Ben Gerusha or Ben Chalutza, that he was born to a Gerusha or a Chalutza. And so you see, a father is believed. So in the Rishonim, there's a lot of discussion around how does this work? In other words, why is he believed? The basic question, the way the Rashbam understands it, is that there's a category. You believe a father as to the status of his child. So if you believe him that he's a Bechor, you should believe him that he's a Gerusha or a Chalutza. Tosas says, Tema, what kind of business is this? Just because he's believed by a Bechor, you should believe him for a psul. Now, so the way I understand Tosas' question, I would think, is that there's Mammon and there's Isser. So just because you believe him for purposes of allocating money, purposes of Isser. The Tosas in Kedushin asks the question a little differently. He says, in the case of a son, you're benefiting the son by saying he's a Bechor. And so therefore you're giving him a benefit. When you're saying he's a Ben Gerusha or Ben Chalutza, you're turning him into a Cholol. So how can you compare them? In one case you're helping the son, in the other case you're not helping the son. So he has a problem with the Rashbam. That's his problem with the Rashbam. Right, I've thought about that. I didn't have a chance to look at it, but I had a similar thought. But to the Tosas over there, he says, I don't get it. You're saying that he's benefiting the son by giving him double, and that halacha is a benefit, whereas you're taking away from him when you're making a chol. What about the other brothers? If you make this guy into the Bechor and someone else was the Bechor, you're taking away from the brothers. Understand Tosas' kasha. So maybe we'll understand Tosas' kasha the way we initially said. How do you do it if it's a how do you compare an Isser and Mammon? So a monetary matter of inheritance with the Isser of saying that he's a Cholol. So Tosas says as follows, something very interesting. So remember the case I said before. Let's say you had a kid who's 18, who's his son, and you have a kid who's 12, and he points at the 12-year-old and says, "This is the kid who's my Bechor." Right? If he's believed that the 12-year-old is his Bechor, what does that say about the 18-year-old who was born to his wife? It's saying that he's a mamzer because it's not his. He's saying if he's believed to say that the 12-year-old is his Bechor, then obviously the 18-year-old is not his child. And if it's not his child but was born to his wife, so he's saying he's a mamzer. So Tosas says, by believing him to say that the 12-year-old is his Bechor, you're allowing him to say that the older child is a mamzer. If you're going to let him say that a child's a mamzer, then you could similarly say that he's a Ben Gerusha or Ben Chalutza, which is only a Cholol. So that's how Tosas learned. Tosas brings Rabbeinu Elio, who says a little bit differently, who learns it out that the pasuk that says Yakir ben Asnua, the Gemara in Yavamas that we learned said it is Snua b'nesueha. What does it mean that the wife is hated? The wife was hated because she's hated for her marriage, meaning that he married her. We know if there's an Isser Kares and the guy marries her, the Kiddushin doesn't take effect. But if it's Isser Lav, like a Kohen to a Grusha or a Kohen to a Chalutza, well, that's the Rabbanim, but according to Grusha, that would be that's what it means when she's hated. So if you see that Yakir, the word Yakir, the Rabbeinu Elio says, goes even on a son of the Snua, to believe him that this is a son of the Snua. What does it mean when you say it's a son of a Snua? It means even though it's a Ben Gerusha, it's an Isser Lab, you still do it. So that's how we know from the fact that we believe him on the Bechor that we also believe on turning him into a Cholol for Ben Gerusha, Ben Chalutza, because by definition, if you're recognizing the son of the hated one to be the Bechor, he's acknowledging that he was married to Isser Lav. Okay, in any event, that's the halacha. Rabbi Yehuda learns from Yakir that a man is not only can he recognize his son to give, or should recognize his son to give him the double portion, but he's believed to identify him for others and to say that this other child is a Bechor or he's a Ben Gerusha or Ben Chalutza. And the Chachamim say Eino Neman, he's not Neman. Is the machlokas the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, and Shmuel was mesupik, whether the halacha is like the Chachamim, in which case we don't believe the father, or the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, in which case we do believe the father, and that's why he said, do the harsha zeh lazeh. Okay, Amr le Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak le Rava. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said to Rava, Bishlam le Rabbi Yehuda hainu d'chsiv Yakir. He says, okay, that makes sense. Yakir is an extra word. So the Chachamim, Rabbi Yehuda used it to determine that not only the Bechorah, but he's believed to identify him. Elul Rabbanan Yakir lamali, but the Rabbanan who say we don't believe the father to identify him. Why does it say the word Yakir? It says B'tzarech Hekera. That when do we believe the father to say that this is his son? When we need some kind of recognition. Rashbam says, what would be a case like this, where let's say they family moved to town, which is his bechor. So he says, that's my bechor. Or he goes overseas, or whatever it is. There's different cases. But the idea, according to the Rabbanan, is why does it say Yakir? It doesn't mean that he can identify him against a chazakah. It means he can identify him when there's no mitigating factor going against. So then we believe the father. And that's what you see from Yakir. But Yakir is not strong enough to tell you that it would go Edim or against the chazakah. So the Gemara says, well, Lamai Hilchasam. Point. In other words, what's your point in telling me we believe the father? Of course we believe the father. Why? Because Lemeisvala Pishnayim. Are you going to tell me that we need it in order to say that he can recognize this Bechor for purpose of giving him double? Lo Yehei Ela Acher. So forget even whether he's his son altogether. Let him be a third party. So he says, if he wanted to give, any portion of his estate to a total stranger, he could do that, right? So since he could take, half of his estate, 3/4 of his estate, and give it to a stranger, surely he's entitled and believed to say, because it's a migu. Why would he lie and say it's his bechor if it's not his bechor and he wants to give him extra money? Give him extra money. Give it to him in matana. So what would be the point of lying? So therefore, he has a migu. So the Gemara is saying, why do I need, according to the Rabbanan and the pasuk Yakir, to tell me that a father can be believed when no one's contesting it? Of course he's believed because he has a migu. So the Gemara says, we need it. No, we're talking about what happened. The father says, this is my son, right? He's believed at that point because of migu, he could have given his assets to the son at this point. But remember, once he identifies him as his bechor, yes, between now and the time he dies are going to go double to this son. And there's no migu. Why? Because that if someone doesn't have something yet, he can't be makna to someone else. So the whole migu was based on the fact that why do we believe him to say the son gets double is because we believe him to say the son gets double because he could have given it to him. So Gemara says, no, we need it for the case where it's covering things that he didn't get yet. And if he didn't get them yet, he can't give them. If he can't give them, he doesn't have the migu. So that's why we needed Yakir. As Yakir Lamali. So if the Rabbanan hold like Rameir, that you can be makna davar shelo bali olam, so then he still has his migu because he's saying I could have given him. Of course, he should believe me without a pasuk that he's my bechor, because what's the consequence of being a bechor? That he gets pishnayim. I could have given him pishnayim, and you'll tell me what about things that aren't in his possession yet? According to Rameir. So what do we need the pasuk of Yakir for? The Gemara says that we need the father. We need a pasuk to tell us the father is believed. Because there is a case where even according to Reb Meir, who says that a person can be makna davar shelo bali olam, there's something that he can't be makna. What is that case? That if you have someone literally in the process of dying in his last seconds, right? So he's not in a position to do any kind of kinyan to give over the thing. So therefore, since in case he's going to get assets that are going to come to him when he's a goses, transfer them. If he's not able to transfer them, so then he no longer has a migu on those assets. So therefore, we needed the pasuk to tell us that the father is believed to say this is his bechor. He's going to get assets while he's a goses, and then he wants this son to be able to get the pishnayim from that. Okay, Taner Rabbanan, the two dots. That that if it was muhtzak that he's a Bechor, everyone assumed that this, or thought this was the Bechor. V'amar Aviv, and his father said, Al Acher, on a different son, Shehu Bechor, that he's a Bechor, Neman. So who's that saying like? It's just like Rabbi Yehuda. It's saying where a father says, this is my son, and it goes against the Chazakah, he's believed. That's the halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The Brisa continues, if it was muhtzak in someone that he's not a Bechor, V'amar Aviv Bechor who, and the father says, the son who you think is not a Bechor is a Bechor, Eino Neman. He's not Neman. So what do you see? You see that when you have a chazaka against the father's not believed. So that seems to be the halacha of the Chachamim. So the Nami, Reisha Rabbi Yehuda, the Seifa Rabbanan, that the Reisha is Rabbi Yehuda who holds that a father is believed, can I get a chazaka? And the Seifa is Rabbanan who holds he's not believed. Rabbi Yochanan. What happens as follows? Interesting case. Amr Benihu. So a guy says this. He points to a kid. He says, "This is my son." Abdihu. And then he says, "No. He's not really my son. He's really my eved. He's really my slave. So he's not entitled to Yerusha." The Gemara says, "Eina neman." He's not believed. Rashbam explains why. Because we say a father is believed to say his son is a son, right? So at that point, he's believed, right? So he's believed to say that's his son. And kivan shehigid shuven echazor magid. Once someone gives testimony, they can't change their testimony. Because he's not my son, he's an eved, right? And you cannot understand that he was explaining what he meant. He said, I called him my son because I love him, but really he's my eved. Call his eved a son. And so we believe his first statement, or his second statement. So we do not believe the father to say that he's an eved once he said he's a son. What about the? When he says he means Bechor or not? No, we're not even talking about Bechor here. So now, what happens if he said this person is my slave, and then he came back and said no, he's really my son. So in that case, Neman, that he's believed. Why? The Mishamish li ka'avda ka'amar. Because I can take his second statement and treat it as an explanation of the first. Remember, first he said, it's my slave. Then he said, it's my son. So then the father comes along and says, why did I say he's my slave? Because I was annoyed at him that he's serving me so much, that he's treating me, he's acting as if he's my slave, but really he's my son. So therefore, even though initially he said he's my servant, he can then come back and say he's my son. So in that case, if you can look at the second statement as an explanation of the first, you can believe the second statement. But if the second statement does not work with the first, so if he first says it's my son, and then he says it's my eved, we don't believe it because no one would ever call his eved a son. But the opposite halacha applies when you're at the toll booth where they collect the tax. Why? You go to the place to pay the tax. The halacha is that a son, you don't get paid the tax, you don't have to pay tax for. But an eved, you have to pay tax for. So therefore, haya over al beis hameches, if he was passing the beis hameches, Amar benihu, and he says he's my son. Now remember, before we said if he first says son and then eved, we don't believe him. But here he says benihu b'chad rama avdi, and then he comes back and says, no, really, he's my slave. Avdihu neman. He's believed. Why is he believed? Because he says, why did I say he was my son? Because I didn't want to pay the tax for him. Now that I'm out of the tax house, I eved. So then we believe him because it makes sense why he did it. And conversely, Amar Avdihu, if he in the tax house he says he's my slave because of Ami Benihu, and then he comes back and says he's my son, Einanem, and he's not believed, because what kind of idiot would say that his son is his eved and then he has to pay tax on him? Whereas if he's his son, he doesn't have to pay tax. So therefore, the fact that he chose to call him an eved in the tax house proves that it's for sure his eved. Otherwise, he would never, if it was his son, he'd have said so that he doesn't have to pay the tax. So now the Gemara asks on this halacha of Rabbi Yochanan. Meisvei, we asked from a brisa, and the first part of the brisa is not going to be a kasha. It's actually going to be a support. It's the second part of the brisa that's a kasha. Haya masham shoy keben. What happened if this person was serving the other as like a son? So the Rashbam says you put on his clothes, you feed him, the kinds of thing a son does for a father. Uba ba'amar benihu, and the father says that's my son. Avdihu, and then he comes back and says he's my servant. Eino neman. He's not believed. He's not believed because this is the same halacha of Rabbi Yochanan. no one calls their Eved a son. So the fact that he first called him a son, it doesn't help. The fact that he first called him a son makes him his son. And when you change and say the Eved, he's not believed. And the Rashbam points out that this not only is consistent with Rabbi Yochanan, and actually it proves a little bit of an additional point that even though the son was serving him like a son, he can't come back and say that he's an Eved. What happens if he was serving him? This person was serving the other person like an Eved, doing the not nice things that an Eved typically does. And he says, "This is my Eved." And then he comes back and says, "He's my son." So remember, what did Rabbi Yochanan say in this halacha? Rabbi Yochanan said if he first says he's my son, we believe him because we say the son was treating him like an Eved, but he really is his son. So and Rabbi Yochanan said he's Neman. What does the Brisa say? Eno Neman. So the second part of a Brisa is a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said that if he first said Avdi and then he said Bani, he's Neman. And here it says if he first says Avdi and then he says Bani, he's not believed. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said Hasam the Karole Avda Meitzar Meya. Case of the Brisa where it says we don't believe him when he first called him an Eved and then called him a son is where he called him an Eved Meitzar Meya, whose boundary is 100. My Meitzar Meya, what his boundary is 100? Meitzar, the boundary of this Eved, meaning its value, because Rashbam says that Shesmuchin li alav mea dinar, he's worth, I can rely on him that he's worth 100 dinar, so that Meitzar, the value of my Eved is kuf zuz, he's 100 zuz. So basically what we're saying is as follows, that if a guy says he's my Eved and then he says he's my son, we believe him because maybe he's just explaining, I was annoyed at him that he was serving me like an Eved, so I said he's my son. So then you could say he's clarifying. So Rabbi Yochanan's halacha is you would believe. But if what he first did was said, this is my servant who's worth 100 zuz, and then he says, no, he's really my son, in that case we don't believe him because no one would refer to his son, even if he's serving like an Eved, as an Eved who's worth 100 zuz. Okay.
No, this is stop broadcasting.